All right, I'm here with brother and sister Pickering, and I don't have a bio ready, but that's okay because you guys know who these folks is right?
You spoke like me.
And we have a playlist. This is their third time on the program, so if you haven't seen my whole playlist, I'm building it up with Rhonda and Farrell Pickering, who are uh, eschatologists. Um, and the best ones because they're not indoctrinated by uh, the colleges. They just do it. They dive in and they do it. So without further ado, let's get started. Hi,
How are you?
Hi. How are you
I'm
Yeah,
great.
today?
Um,
yeah. I
what-
just,
what-
I just thinking about our last weekend at the Book of Mormon conference, and the topic we spoke on. I don't know about everybody else, but the topic we spoke on was the next 10 years because that's kind of been fresh on our mind based on our perception of how this is all going to roll out, and so because of that, um, Um, I think we're going to get into a little bit of that same topic with just a little bit more of a discussion about the two big players on we'll call it on the dark side, and in Star Wars, you got the Emperor, and then you got, Darth Vader, and, you got to keep straight which bad guy's on stage. And so that's kind of been our discussion as far as us trying to sort out because it's just recently in our doing a deep dive into Ezra's Eagle that we
mhm.
begin to understand that there's actually two players on the stage in the end times, and it actually is laid out in the book of Revelation where in chapter 13 uh, the second beast comes out of the first, and that it's a two-headed beast. The first beast has 10 horns and the second beast has two horns. And anyway, long and short of it is one kind of morphs out of the other. And we look at that and we now realize, because of the time frame it gives in Revelation, that each of them reign approximately 42 months. The first one 42 and the second one 43 roughly. um, and so we've come to realize that there's actually two players, the little horn, and then what we would commonly call the Antichrist. Um, Little horn spoken of in Daniel chapter
For,
7.
for a long time, we thought they were the same.
Yeah,
So did
absolutely.
I until you just said it right now.
Yeah.
Okay, we actually believed that up until about 3 months ago, believe it or not, because that's been a common trip up even in the Christian world where they have put it all into one cap. But when you understand the whole term is 7 years, and you read in Revelation that he only reigns 42 months, and then the other one reigns in actually the ascension of Isaiah. It says it actually ties into 1,335 days, which is fascinating, spoken of in Daniel.
We'll actually explain that
Yeah, we'll
in a
get into
minute.
that a little more, but this is just a
But
little introduction
right.
that we have realized now that the little horn plays out kind of in the King of the South, or the Western Empire, or the Western powers, and the King of the North actually plays out in the Assyrian powers in the kind of Russia Gog Magog
Hmm.
scenario. So we're actually realizing that these two players stage out in the end times, and it's actually between those two players that the treaty of Daniel 9 verse 27 actually is made, is between those two players.
So just to give everybody a clue where we went with this, it's what tipped us off that there are two different people was in Daniel 7, verse 8. There's a couple verses here, but I'll just read verse 8 and 9. It says, "And I considered the horns, the 10 horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn." So this little horn is he starts out part of the 10 horns, and it says, "Before whom the three of the first horns were plucked up by the roots." And we thought, well, there's three heads of the eagle that go down. Is there a tie
That's
in
what I
here,
was
a
just,
connection?
yeah.
So, but we'll just leave that one on the table. But it says that behold, the horn has a big mouth, he's speaking blasphemies and great things. But here's the clincher. I beheld till the thrones were cast down and the Ancient of Days did sit. And so the Ancient of Days, of course, is
Michael.
Michael or Adam. And so we're seeing that this little horn ends when Michael stands, when the Ancient of Days sits. And it seems like this is when this King of the North character, this Antichrist character, this is when he takes power and control.
His double crosses.
He double crosses the little horn actually in Daniel 11. So
that peace treaty that's made in Daniel 9, verse 27, the king of Assyria or the Antichrist,
he breaks it.
He breaks it and betrays the West.
But the little horn made it.
And the little horn in him made it. And that's what these wars we're in right now are going to lead up to that treaty. And when that treaty is made, it's going to carry for 3.5 years or halfway through the seven last years. And then he breaks the treaty. And that's when the eagle is burned, as it says in Ezra's eagle.
Can you read that verse that talks about the king of the north taking over the little horn? Or
let's go to Daniel 9:27 and read that first.
Okay, well here you want me to read? Okay.
Yeah, you read.
I didn't know if you guys were going to read that or not. I know you were explaining it.
We will.
Okay, sorry.
Actually, so we've been a little bit sparring over this for a while.
Yeah, we talk back and forth until we work it out. And sometimes it can almost sound like, nah, you're crazy.
Well, we wanted to, well, number one, we camped out for a week and with a couple of our friends and just hammered out whether the little horn could be different than the Antichrist. And really, we went back and forth for a week until we both agreed on that. But then the next issue that we were like, wait a minute, I see it this way, and wait a minute, I see it this way, is that, excuse me, one of them sits on the throne, sits in the temple, and declares himself to be God. So is this the little horn, or is this the Antichrist? And
yeah, that's been the discussion, because it seems like in the last verse of Daniel 11, he is no more the Antichrist that sits on the throne of God. And the discussion has been, well, who sits on the throne, or in essence, who sits in the Holy of Holies over in Jerusalem?
Well, it's interesting because you said earlier that the little horn morphs, and every animation or picture you see it, it's a very ugly picture of this little horn coming out of a
big mouth little horn.
Yeah, this is amazing. I love this because I've heard this before in the past, and I can't remember where I saw it. There's been ideas about the little horn maybe being. Is this okay, is the little horn, I know you're going to get to it. I'm just going to shut up, but I want to ask this. Is the little horn in an alliance with the big guy, with the Antichrist?
Yeah, they actually
sort of.
Well, it's an alliance with. Go to.
Yeah, I got it. Daniel 11. Yeah.
Yeah, you find that one. Let's just read about this treaty that these two make. Actually, I'm going to say 3. It's the little horn, the Antichrist, or the king of Assyria, and Israel. Israel will be in this treaty, because the whole treaty is going to be to solve all these wars and rumors of wars that are coming right now. The Ezekiel 35-36 war, it's also referred to as the Psalms 83 war, the one of hatred we talked about in the past.
I'm ready if you're ready.
Okay, this treaty that's going to be after these wars, which are right now, we're experiencing tons, and it's actually escalating. Anybody's watching it. You now got North Korea entering in with Russia in the attack against Ukraine. Iran's threatening all kinds of stuff right now, but their threats a whole lot less now that Israel thumped them good. But in essence, what's going to happen is this war is going to just play back and forth, and it's going to create the circumstances after we've warred probably for the next 3 years. We're going to probably be in a lot of different kinds of war and conflict. It's just going to be wars and rumors of wars, like it refers to.
There's going to be unrest in America too.
Yes, absolutely. I think, I don't know exactly when this video will go up, but we're like 3 days out from the election, and we all expect it to
I can
be
put it up as soon as possible.
it. We
Um,
all expect it to be very, very contentious over this
They're,
Scary.
election.
they're actually doing training drills in
Yeah, I don't
Washington
know if you paid attention, but they are
Oh,
actually
wow.
doing rehearsed drills of evacuating DC.
right
They
now.
have Black Hawk helicopters doing drills in DC right now.
Well,
Landing.
that almost tells you that they know. Is this the CIA doing this
Well, who
or
knows
the
who's it's
FBI,
well, it's actually the military
the
doing drills,
military?
helping them.
Almost as though they know they're gonna cheat, maybe. You know what I mean?
Well,
Or
there's going to be pushback.
they know that whatever happens, it's going to be messy because they brewed so much contention. I mean, the media is just fanning the contention, fanning the fire with all their lies, and then it doesn't help that. I mean, I love the policies of Trump, but he's quite a contentious guy in his approach, and
Yeah.
so it's just got everything so polarized. I absolutely think. I mean, I absolutely believe he's the right choice. However, I don't believe it's going to happen. They're not going to let him go in.
Well,
That's
that's Ezra's Eagle.
that's
And
Ezra's Eagle. That's a
that's
little bit
different. Yeah,
sidetracked.
that's a
I
rabbit.
mean, if you want to get information on that, go to the video I put up, Wake Up to Your Awful State on Latter-day Media, and you'll see how we look at Ezra's Eagle quite a bit and how that's coming down. So that's kind of a scary
Now,
situation.
one other thing real quick. Two things, just because I have to ask this. The first thing you said, put up the image, Rhonda. You said, why don't you put up the image? You're talking about the timeline, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But what
So
part of the timeline? Let me
well,
write that down.
what we have here is we have a 7 year period in America that ends with Michael standing and Adam on Diamond. That's our deliverance. And that is the double cross of the eagle. That's when the eagle gets burned. That's when with the whole peace treaty gets double crossed right there. And
Okay.
then,
And there's actually on that chart, there's actually a little mushroom cloud
yeah, there's an atomic
Oh,
at the
bomb
bottom.
going off
So you
right
know
there.
where
so
that's at.
so
So
just show
that,
that whole 7 year span.
yeah, so there's
Okay.
that 7 year span to Adam on Diamond. But then underneath that on our chart, you have a 7 year span in blue. And that 7 year span ends at the Mount of Olives. You can see Jesus coming, returning in red on a white horse. That period. So the 7 year tribulation period for Israel ends with Adam on Diamond. That's when they're delivered. But in America, our 7 year period ends with the
Adam.
Adam on Diamond,
And
and
that's
when
where the little horn comes to his end, which is I'm about to read.
which is when Michael stands at Adam on Diamond and the New Jerusalem or Zion is delivered. And so our two periods of time overlap 3.5 years.
Okay.
And that's what causes all of the scriptures to fit together. And that's what we could have never guessed, that they overlapped like that. Daniel's numbers just turned out that way. And and since we saw that, we have found dozens of scriptures and other things that we're going to bring in today about the little horn that just absolutely back up this
Yeah, it
scenario.
starts to lock everything in. I mean, when we had our conversation with Glenn Beck, we had just barely made the discovery of the structure and
That they overlap.
kind of had a pretty good idea of how to all fit together on a grand scale. But since then, I mean, the conversation was, so what do we do and how does this all play out? And I said, I don't know yet. I mean, maybe we're not supposed to. Well, over the last 4 years, hard to believe it's been 4 years. Yeah, we've filled in a lot of details. In fact,
all the time.
even the last 2 or 3 months, we've filled in a lot of details.
Right.
And it keeps growing. So anyway, let's just talk about this covenant that's going to take place if our
Before you start this, I did look up Joseph Smith and the 10 toes, and then
Yes.
I couldn't find anything, even though you're not the only ones that have said that. I've heard many people say that.
Yes, we can
Um,
give you the reference.
Yeah,
It's in the teachings
it's
of
in
the
the history
prophet.
of the church. You can
Okay.
find
All right.
and the teachings of the
Right.
prophet.
That's fine.
Anyway.
Go ahead.
But I think before you go to the treaty, let me just answer his question about you're saying that the little horn and the
An alliance.
Antichrist,
Yeah.
that he said that they're different. That verse is in Daniel 11, and it says,
Oh,
And
yeah, yeah,
both
yeah, yeah.
these kings' hearts shall be to do mischief. We're in Daniel 11:27, and it says, and they shall speak lies at one table, but it shall not prosper. So they're lying to each other across the negotiation table here.
And yet they make the deal.
But it says, but it shall not prosper, for yet the end shall be at the time appointed, at the prophetic appointed time that we've been talking
Do you
about.
think that could be Russia and China
I think it's the
The Assyrian,
I think it's the
or
Assyrian,
closer to
but
Jerusalem?
Russia, it's actually kind of Turkey, Iran, and
Ah,
Russia in their allies,
right? Antiochus
and the
Epiphanes.
West. The little horn is going to be kind of the leader of the West.
uh,
Okay. And
Antiochus Epiphanes that we are going to be talking about in a minute was from Syria. And then in Isaiah, it's the king of Assyria, which is further north. And so it's the Turkey, all of this area we know is where he comes from. So it's an alliance. It's not just one.
right.
I actually think, this is a way conjecture, but I actually think China is actually not going to play as big a part because it does say in the millennium that the heathen nations get allowed a little time. They're not judged as harshly as the rest. So I think China's
Well,
quite a heathen nation, and all the Far East, not the Middle East, but the Far East is very much the heathen nations. So I'm not sure how much China is going to play into this. This is just
into this,
into this particular scenario.
this Israel scenario or this Egypt scenario,
The treaty.
the treaty
They
itself.
probably will side with Russia, but they're not going to be the ringleader, is my feeling.
Well, that's just
Interesting.
That's
Well, then you've got this.
speculation,
That's
and
totally-
I'm not sure that I'm totally on the same page with that. I think that China will have to do with the cleansing of Egypt of America, but 200 million.
200 million man
Army.
army too. Where's that coming?
Right.
That could just be all the alliances too.
Well, we're actually going to read that
Okay,
first
go
and
ahead.
talk about it in just a minute, but we do need to go back to the treaty. You know, as far as which nation is which player and everything, there's speculation with that a lot, but we can take the issue of the Antichrist and the little horn. We can take that right to the text, and I think iron that
Well,
out.
and just real quick, I'm not trying to keep him from getting started,
Yeah,
but
that's okay.
it just is very too coincidental that Vladimir Putin has been very involved with Syria and and then
Exactly.
even before all that, even before he came aboard several years ago doing all that, I always believed he was the one that God hooked to take a spoil.
Right.
Do you know what I
And
mean?
absolutely. Well, and I think it's, I did a video, boy, it's been 5 years ago at least, where Daniel Code 2. I don't know where I'm all of a sudden getting the sniffles. Okay, so in Daniel 9, verse 27, this is the covenant. Well, let's just give me a rough overview, and then let's start to define the pieces. So the overview is the next 3 years are conflict and wars and rumors of wars, and you know, back and forth. We got North Korea joining Russia and Iran, and you got Israel. So that's where we're at in the next 3 years.
Right, and let me read this verse right here. And after the league made with him, he shall work deceitfully. So that's what you're about to read in 9:27. That's where it is in Daniel chapter 11, verse 23. But the point is that there's a league with all
With
of
each of them.
these.
Both
Yeah,
sides are a
they have allies.
confederation. Okay, so this is, we're assuming the king of Assyria shall make a covenant with many for 1 week. Well, in Hebrew, that week is Shavua. It's 7-year period. So you understand, especially in the context of the last 3 verses, you got to understand that word in Hebrew is Shavua. It means sevens. Okay.
It could be 7 days, 7 weeks,
Weeks,
7 years,
yeah.
7 months.
So in this instance, it's a 7-year period. So he confirmed the covenant with many for 1 week of years. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice of oblation to cease. And for the overspreading of abomination, he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation and the determination shall be poured out upon the desolate. Now that's very cryptic or hard to follow the flow of wording, but you can actually go to Matthew
24.
24 and you can get this abomination of desolation he's referring to here from Christ in that sermon. And you know that this event that terminates the daily sacrifice is this double cross.
And of course, in order to terminate the daily sacrifice, it had to start.
It had to start. Exactly. And so that's what we know there. And we know that the two that do the mischief at the table, and understand these are all types and shadows of things of the past. Like it says in Isaiah 46:10, you know,
Right.
I'll show you the things of the future by the past.
Well, and Christ would not have spoken about it if it wasn't important for us to talk about.
Exactly.
And Joseph Smith translation of Matthew 24 actually talks about multiple fulfillments of this abomination of desolation. Okay. So in that regard, you have to tie in the ancient type, which is Antiochus Epiphanes. And he is the ancient type of the Antichrist.
So,
and the little horn is the Western leader. And that's what we've just learned in the last 2 months or 3 months, that the little horn is actually different than the Antichrist. And he comes to his end at Adam Ammon, as it says in Daniel chapter 7, where we just read that he reigns up until Michael stands, or the Ancient of Days stands.
He's the Antichrist mini-me.
Actually, that the Antichrist
The little horn.
him,
They should have the little horn like this.
So last night I was in Costco and I met a friend and they were talking about sometimes we talk historically on our videos, and a lot of people out there don't know who Antiochus Epiphanes is and all of this. So I just want to, for all of you out there that don't know that, just hold on. We're going to talk about him in just a minute. But he was a type. Should we talk?
Yeah, just tell that whole.
He was a type and a shadow for the end time Antichrist. He is Daniel 11, the king of the north and the king of the south and everything. It played out historically in his time, as well as it's a prophecy in the end time, just like Isaiah says. So
quick comment there. Just you could, as you read Daniel 11, it actually says, and at the end. So it's jumping back and forth, and it's telling the same story with two applications. So you got the one application, which was that Antiochus Epiphanes, who did the original abomination of desolation. He was the original.
Well, is that Titus?
No, it's not Titus. Titus is from Rome. Antiochus Epiphanes is one of the 4 generals after Alexander the Great. So he's from Greece. So
you could argue that Titus is also a fulfillment of that. In other words, there's been multiple times,
but
prophecy is fulfilled cyclically.
We're talking about the first temple, then.
We are talking about
after it's rebuilt, about 167 BC.
And it didn't get destroyed. So let me go back and tell you the story.
Okay.
The Maccabees.
It's the story of Hanukkah. It's the story of the Maccabees. And it's in the Apocrypha in the Bible.
70, it's after 70 AD then. Okay.
Yeah.
No,
it's before. It's BC.
BC.
That's what I mean. It was so that Christ he could tell the story in Matthew 24 because he's referring to something that happened.
You're saying fulfilled once and it gets fulfilled.
Right. I
gotcha.
Exactly. And that's what Joseph Smith alludes to in his Joseph Smith translation of Matthew 24. Multiple abominations of desolation. Very good.
I come up with them.
Well,
Okay.
we all get lucky sometimes.
Yeah,
So,
right, right.
I'm gonna read a little bit. I'm gonna tell you a couple of quote from one of my favorite books on the prophetic appointments on the feasts of the Lord. This is from Marvin Rosenthal, and to this day it's still one of my favorite books because he's Jewish. He understands the Jewish perspective, but he's Christian and he understands the messianic application to these feasts of the Lord, these prophetic appointments. Just like we just read, it said, but the end will be at the time appointed. Well, this is what the scriptures are talking about. The Moedim, these feasts of the Lord that were rehearsals in the temple. And anytime you have an ordinance in the temple, ancient or today, it's always a rehearsal of something prophetic. And I always like to use baptism because the ordinance of baptism, what is all of this? Why do you go underwater? All of this. And it's a symbol of the resurrection. It's a symbol of dying and being born again. And so the ordinance that we perform is a type and a shadow of something future that we look forward to, particularly with regard to coming back into God's presence. So this is what all ordinances are about, is a rehearsal for the future. So when we talk about the prophetically appointed times, remember that they were ordinances in the temples anciently. And we've lost all of our understanding of what these types and shadows meant. Now, Hanukkah is not one of the big seven, I call them the seven prophetic appointed times that are appointments with Jesus Christ and the earth. Hanukkah is an appointment with the bad guy. And that's why it's not one of the big seven.
An overthrow of the bad guy.
But it is still very, very prophetic. Okay, so we're in Maccabees. We know that after Alexander the Great died at age 33, then his kingdom was split between his four generals. The two that we're going to care about is the Antiochus Epiphanes, who will come from the Seleucid Empire.
He wasn't general at the time of Alexander's death. He is a general that came
down from the Seleucid Empire, right, in the north.
Yes.
And then there was a kingdom of one of Alexander's four generals. It's Lysimachus. I can't say these big words, but anyway, he was in the south and he was over Egypt. And so that's why when we read Daniel 11, we see the king of the north being from the Seleucid, Syrian, Turkey, Syrian Empire, and the king of the south being Ptolemaic. It's from Egypt.
And we're allied with, Isaiah tells us that we are Egypt in the last days because of our relationship as being a superpower, but also we're aligned with the king of the south.
Well, and also in Ether 13, it says that just as Joseph went to Egypt, Lehi came to America. He puts Egypt and America in parallel, right in the Book of Mormon.
So that's where we get that the king of the north will be the Assyrian-Russian alliance.
Yeah.
And the king of the south is the American
West Alliance. Right.
And Israel's kind of in that alliance.
That's interesting.
So back to the time of Antiochus Epiphanes, who was like we say, he was the emperor that came down from the Seleucid kingdom that broke off from Alexander the Great. We're going to just talk about the fact that he tried to conquer the king of the north tried to conquer the king of the south. He went down to Egypt and tried to conquer Egypt. Now, Antiochus Epiphanes IV was thwarted by Rome. I mean, the Roman general actually came, and I'm trying to think if I can find, I'll just tell it. He actually came in when Antiochus Epiphanes was about to conquer the king of the south. The Roman general came in and he said,
just to get this right,
want war with Rome or not? Because we're going to defend Egypt.
So let me just kind of define a little bit. the king of the north and the king of the south were kind of the descendant empires of the two of the generals. The other two generals were Octavius was coming through that line, and the Roman Empire comes through that line, and Anthony. So these four generals are playing out. But when we're talking the king of the north, they actually are the west. Okay, Rome and King
Egypt.
Anthony, okay, are the west, and the king of the north, king of the south are the east almost, or the Middle East.
Wow.
That relationship.
Well, you said Egypt too, right?
Yeah, Egypt aligns with Anthony. Okay, and well, basically Cleopatra and Anthony
Oh
become
yeah.
lovers.
Yeah,
Okay,
The
so this
Greeks,
history
yeah.
kind of flows down, and I'm telling.
Alexander the Great loved Egypt, yeah.
So we're kind of flowing over 400 years of history very quickly. Okay, just understand that this 400 years ends um,
It's
at
almost,
least.
can I just say that it's almost like an alliance between Great Britain and the United States, you know?
Yeah, there's
When
there's
you say
tons
the
of
West and
yes.
Egypt was such a diverse melting pot, just like the United States. Wow, that's amazing.
All right, so we're returning back to the type of Antiochus Epiphanes because as far as the prophetic appointments go, he is our type of the Antichrist, which is the discussion we're having right now. So let's learn a little bit about him. It says, meanwhile, the ambitions of Antiochus Epiphanes continued to grow, and he aspired to reunify the Grecian Empire as in the days of Alexander the Great. So it's now all split up, but he wants it to be one kingdom, one world order again.
Yeah,
He
he
wants
wants
to
to.
be the boss, right? Okay. So it says, you can see why he's a type of the Antichrist in the end time. All right. It says that in 168 BC, he warred against Egypt. So we have the king of the north fighting the king of the south here, and victory seemed certain. However, the Roman Senate dispatched Pompilius Laenus, I hope I said that right, to prevent Antiochus from taking Egypt. So when he was asked if he wished peace or war with Rome, Antiochus stalled. The Roman representative drew a circle in the sand around Antiochus and stated that he must decide before leaving the circle.
So what that stall is, this hesitation, is this treaty that we're talking about. It's
Wow.
in the type and shadow where you read through Daniel 11 and it's historical and
it's prophetic.
it's prophetic. And so what's happening with this king of the north, king of the south thing, you hear this push and push back, but in the very end, he makes his big final push and he comes with fury, and that's God.
And this is the part where he comes with fury that in history is right here, because he has to withdraw from his attempt to conquer Egypt in humiliation. And as he comes back through Israel's the crossroads between the king of the north and the king of the south. As he's returning back to
Figuratively,
Syria,
that's today too.
he stops in
Right.
Jerusalem, and there is civil war and internal intrigue happening amongst the Jews in Israel. They are kind of split and divided whether they want to become Hellenistic and compromise and be more accepted by the world. And then you have your Orthodox Jewish people that are saying, absolutely not, this is compromising.
Hold the line.
Compromising everything. And so they're having civil war and an internal conflict in Israel when Antiochus Epiphanes comes back through. And that's a type in the shadow too. America can't fall. The king of the south is not going to fall unless we have our own internal conflict. And then we have the king of the north coming through. So just like right here. And it says that Antiochus ordered his general to destroy Jerusalem, and the full heat of his wrath and frustration was vented on the Jewish people. And now I'm not going to go into all the history about it. I'll just say that he erected a statue of Zeus in the temple.
In the holy. Place.
in the, actually in the, at the altar of sacrifice out front, and people, and that image of him, just like Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel chapter 2, and when he erects the image, it's an image of Nebuchadnezzar. They're supposed to worship him. Antiochus Epiphanes has erected an image in the courtyard of sacrifice in the temple of him. It's Zeus with Antiochus Epiphanes' face on it. Okay.
Oh.
And he is requiring everyone, he slaughters a pig on the altar,
Mhm.
and then he brings the blood of the pig into the Holy of Holies and sprinkles the blood of the pig. So Israel as a nation
Total
is reeling with shock
desecration
and
of the
horror.
temple.
And he has destroyed the city. Hundreds of thousands of people have been killed and taken into slavery. And this is our type and a shadow of the Antichrist. When he comes in to Jerusalem, he puts his image in the temple and desecrates and commits what in scriptures is called the abomination of desolation.
Mhm.
Okay. And so, of course, you're going to have this come to a head after 3 years. You're going to have the Maccabees. He's going to try and force Mattathias, one of the high priests, to slaughter a pig on the altar. And he's an old man, and he refuses to do it. And so the Roman soldier is getting ready to slay him. And Mattathias takes the spear and slays the soldier. And then there was another high priest that offered to do the sacrifice instead of Mattathias. And the beautiful thing here is that when Mattathias, when he offers that sacrifice, all the people are going to be required to eat the pork. I mean, that's the whole point of slaughtering the pig, is so that everybody eats of that meal and gives their honor to the God there. And so Mattathias doesn't want to put the people through that. And so he slays the high priest, that the other priest that was offering to do the offering. And this is going to start the revolt. They know that Antiochus Epiphanes' fury is going to be poured out on the town of Moedim. And so they all head to the hills. They're in caves. They're basically, the revolt is everybody's starting to come to the wilderness, into the caves, to stand against him. And this is all a type.
Yeah, and we're overdoing the detail
Are
in a
we?
way.
It
But
actually, that was amazing. I mean, amazing and horribly amazing. You know what I mean?
yes,
It's
It's not overdoing
disgusting.
the
It's
type.
blasphemous.
I maybe we're not overdoing the detail. We're overdoing the detail for my 30,000-foot flying. Okay,
I'm
so
about to make a point.
well, before you make that point, is understand that the type of this whole thing is what is going to play out again. And I was going to say I had two epiphanies while you were speaking, and that's what I wanted to really go
Okay,
into.
go for it.
But I wanted to do that after you finish your content rather than splitting it in the middle. But I wanted to get that in there so I don't forget. Remind me.
Okay, several chapters later, Daniel again prophesies of a coming Assyrian or Syrian persecution. And it is in Daniel 11, but the people who know their God. So this, in Daniel 11, this is when it's talking about the time of Antiochus Epiphanes, because this is what really happened. It says in verses 32 and 33, but the people who know their God shall be strong. These are the Maccabees. And they will carry out great exploits. And those of the people who understand will instruct many. And yet for many days they shall fall by sword and flame, by captivity and by plundering. Now, there's all kinds of famous stories in the book of Maccabees about people who stood against Antiochus Epiphanes and gave their lives. And these are, and I don't have time to go all into it. If you get the book, you'll see it. But in Hebrews 11, in the Great Hall of Faith,
Wait, what book? What book?
in Hebrews, in the New
New
Testament.
Testament.
Oh, that
Okay.
book.
It's talking about
relatively,
it's talking about others who were tortured, not accepting deliverance, that they might obtain a better resurrection. That's a direct reference to Hannah and her 7 sons in the
Wow.
story of the Maccabees. So they're mentioned in the Bible. So now we're going to get to our application, but you go ahead
okay.
first.
And the application is that really, whether or not this holiday existed prior to the Maccabees or not, there's not a lot of historical record that would tell us that Hanukkah existed prior to the Maccabees. But Hanukkah became absolutely critical in the relationship of Daniel's numbers when you understand that the daily sacrifice starts on Hanukkah and that the whole blessed is he that come to 1335 days is back to Hanukkah again when the
On our
complete
chart.
the complete cleansing of the temple has taken place. Okay, so that we now are going into what most people would like to call the millennial day, because the Antichrist has been totally put down, the rededication has taken place, and that is the significance of Hanukkah. And Hanukkah is actually far more significant than we ever gave credit to it prior to, the understanding of Daniel's numbers. Anyway, so this
Gotcha.
1,335 days, and this is what we were going through last night, is she's done a relationship even this very last week where she has gone into the ascension of Isaiah.
I'm going to get there.
Am I jumping the
You're
gun?
jumping, yeah.
Well,
I don't want to tie it yet because I want to show.
I like jumping the gun. No, I'm sorry.
I want to show the parallel here because we've talked about Antiochus Epiphanes now, but we need to tie it to Daniel 11.
And whenever you guys have time, I have 2 little dinky questions.
Okay, let me finish this point and then
Don't
we'll
forget 'em.
just hang on to your question.
It's about what you guys are talking about. Don't worry.
All right. So this is from a Jewish perspective. And I love this because this book is written by Marvin Rosenthal, but he understands Christ. And so it's so insightful. But this is from the Jewish perspective. Throughout the ages, Gentile nations have been obsessed with desecrating Temple Mount, the footstool of our God. It was there that Antiochus erected the image of Zeus. It was there that the Roman Emperor Hadrian constructed a temple to Jupiter. And today it has shrines to Allah, the god of the crescent moon. Okay. Now, this Antichrist person in the end time, according to Jewish theology, is known as Armilus, by Jewish theologians, and he is known as the Antichrist by the Christians. And he is foreshadowed by Antiochus Epiphanes. And what's fascinating to me is if you notice, it said, back here, Daniel prophesied that many within Israel will again enter into a covenant or a security agreement that Pharaoh was reading earlier. But here's what they add: with a Gentile ruler.
Little horn.
The little horn. This is the treaty in the West. And so they're
This
saying
is a treaty between the West and the Antichrist, and Israel's in the middle of it.
And it says they will turn to a Gentile leader for peace instead of to the one true God. And then at the midpoint, 3.5 years later, Jerusalem will be captured, and then it will be overrun by the Gentiles. But here is where in Revelation 12, it says the woman flees to the wilderness. This is just like they did at the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. They had to flee into the wilderness. It says
Judean mountains.
And just to tie it all back into Jesus making it a last day prophecy, it says that therefore, when Matthew 24, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains.
Immediately get out.
Yes.
Immediately.
And
So
that is this crossover event. But Adam is the betrayal. That we know that by the transition between chapter 11 and chapter 12 of Daniel, that when he desecrates, Michael stands. That's how we know the timing of it all. And that's how we know that that's when the little horn comes to his end and the Antichrist completely takes over at that point.
So when we say the abomination of desolation, many have different ideas. So I used to think of when you see the desecration, but you're saying it's literally going to be another pig and they're going to try to get people to eat the pig again.
We're saying that it is when a Gentile, a
Well, I would
ruler,
say a pagan leader, a Muslim leader,
whatever leader,
goes in and says, I've eliminated the little horn. And this is her latest perspective, and I'm beginning to totally agree with it. Okay, she's eliminated the little horn, and he says, now I'm it. You guys will worship me, the idol of me, the image of me spoken of in Revelation, and the image of him will even speak. In other words, we could see that in modern technology. The
Right,
image,
right,
you
right.
know, he'll speak, he'll have AI, he'll be able to do a lot of things.
I'm
Mhm.
reading verse 45.
I don't know why all of a sudden started coughing so much.
It's okay. You're all right. That's
So
our
it says,
entertainment.
in Daniel 11:45, and he shall plant the tabernacle of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountain. So between the seas is between the Sea of Galilee, the Dead Sea, and the Mediterranean Sea. Between the
Oh,
seas is Jerusalem. And
right,
so,
right.
Mariah,
so it's really important to understand that there's stuff with the little horn happening over in America
well, the
and then
West, the whole
in the
West.
West, who representing the West, the 10 horns. But then there's stuff happening in Jerusalem where this king of the north is going to actually put his image in the temple. And in Isaiah 14, he declares himself God, and that's in Thessalonians as well. So that is the abomination of desolation, and that's why I read that piece to you on page 173 of the Feast of the Lord. Is that throughout the ages, Gentile nations have been obsessed with desecrating Temple Mount. That's where they erected the image of Zeus. That's where the Roman Emperor Hadrian
They always
built
go
the
after the
temple.
temple.
They
They
go
always
after
go
Temple
after the
Mount, and the
temple.
abomination of desecration is when they put their image, their temple there, and they slaughter the Jews.
And it's almost as though he's not going to, if he's Muslim, he's not going to say, I am God, maybe. That's kind of maybe, I don't know. Do you think if it's a
It does,
Muslim, that's blasphemous within itself, but it's almost
yeah, I
yes,
like,
agree with you.
however,
I agree with you.
they
but
believe,
it's metaphoric.
well, yes and no, because they believe in the Makdid. And
Oh, that's right.
if he
That's
claims to
right.
be the Makdid and they believe he is
Mahdi.
the Mahdi,
The
okay, she said
Mahdi,
I say it wrong. Okay,
the
they will
Imam or
align
whatever. Yeah.
themselves as he's the 12th Imam. Is that how
Yeah,
you say it?
Imam, the
Yeah.
12th
The
Imam.
12th Imam,
Yeah.
and they will honor him in that position. And if you read the dialogue, it says he does not really believe in the religion of his
Exactly. It
people.
says he will
He
not do it, his
pretends to be-
fathers did.
he's playing the game,
Right.
but says he really doesn't believe.
Well, it's interesting because some Muslims, most Muslims believe in Christ too as a
Prophet.
last day guy and prophet. Well, more than just a prophet. They think he's almost as above the 12th Imam. I've even heard, what's interesting, guys? I've even heard some Muslims say that the 12th Imam, there will be that Christ will come and overpower him or something. I don't know. It's just crazy. That's crazy. Anyway, go ahead.
Anyway, this is all going to be playing out. And we were having discussion who sits in the temple and declares himself God, the little horn or the Antichrist. And I'm now seeing that I believe it's it's the Antichrist, because what he does is he comes in and does that at the same time he betrays the West and burns her with fire, as in Ezra's eagle. It also is in Daniel that it gets burned, the beast gets burned at the time Michael stands. So this is all a grand reversal of events playing out simultaneously almost,
Mhm.
within short time frame. It's a Red Sea kind of thing where the Pharaoh of Egypt gets wiped out, and the saints get delivered. However, in this instance, old Israel does not. Old Israel is actually at this time coming totally under the reign of
And of the Antichrist.
the Antichrist.
It's amazing that you're saying that too, Rhonda, because the you're pointing out that Satan puts it into their hearts to just desecrate the temple. Because what is the temple? That's so many things to the saints, to God. It's a place we do our genealogy. That's how we gather Israel. That's how the work goes forward. That is where we get our endowment. That is where we do sealings. It's everything to us.
Absolutely.
And it's everything to the Jews in
Yeah.
Jerusalem as
Well,
well.
same thing. Yeah.
Right.
So the thing that I want to point out here, though, be really careful when you evaluate prophecy that you don't substitute one of our temples for that temple. And the reason I say that is because when I say in prophetic picture, is because you got to realize that location is the location that Abraham offered Isaac. It's the location of, I mean, that general, I mean, it's not exactly in the exact same place, but I actually believe that where Abraham offered Isaac as sacrifice is where the temple is, and that where the ram was in the thicket is actually where the crucifixion took place.
Mm-hmm.
So
Oh,
the type
okay.
is absolutely perfect. In other words, the ram that was to the north from Abraham when he was preparing the altar was where. So this location is where the atonement and the
It's where
crucifixion.
Jesus
This
comes
is the type and shadow of all prophetic pictures.
on the Mount of Olives.
On the Mount of Olives,
Comes there.
the Mount Moriah, that whole scenario. So you can't, in this instance, there's no substitution
No,
for
I
one
don't.
of our
And
temples.
I wasn't doing that. I understand what you're saying. And I agree. What I'm saying is whether it's the old law temple, and the treaty with the Jews, or the sorry, not treaty, the covenant, it's symbolic of not liking that covenant that God makes with Israel.
Absolutely.
That's kind of what I
Exactly.
meant. You know what I
And
mean?
it does, and in spiritual principle, it does play out in
Right, right.
America as
But I
well.
completely understand what you're saying, Farrell. I
Yeah.
completely
That
I just
understand.
want to be careful because you hear a lot of people saying, well, this happened and
it all happens here. It does
yeah,
nothing
nothing
happens over
happens
there.
over there.
Right,
Or
right.
you have the Christians saying it all happens over there and there's nothing over here.
Yeah,
And so
it's
Yeah.
actually requires the restoration to get the relationship
to put it
between
together.
the Antichrist and the little horn,
To merge things. Yeah.
and then the New Jerusalem and the Old Jerusalem. You have to have the context of the whole
And the
picture.
understanding. Right,
Yeah,
right, right.
So Antiochus Epiphanes, his name in Greek means I'm God. I'm Epiphanes, I'm God. And here it is in Second Thessalonians chapter 2. It said, who opposes and exalteth himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he, as God, sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. And so this is this character that is this Antichrist character that is coming in the end time. He's definitely sitting in Jerusalem in a temple, stopping the daily offering there. And then what we're about to learn, that I'm about to read to you, is he doesn't actually stop the offerings. He stops them from being offered to Jehovah and says they have to offer them to him. So we've got that pig going on. So, and I'm going to show you where it says that. And that to do that, we're going to have to go to the ascension of Isaiah. Before we go to the ascension of Isaiah, I want to read Daniel chapter 12, verse 12. You have just one verse with this number. It says, blessed is he that waiteth and cometh to the 1,305 and 30 days. So 1,335 days. Blessed is he that makes it to this 1,335 days. And so when Pharaoh was figuring out Daniel's numbers, how they all play out together and point to Adam-ondi-Ahman, the 1,335 days lands on Hanukkah again. And
which is
so
the type of Antiochus Epiphanes. That's when they
when the
rededicate.
Maccabees took the temple back and cleansed
Mhm.
it. Okay. And
Oh,
so we've always thought, well, blessed is he that makes it to the 1,335 days. That means after the Mount of Olives, 75 days later, they will rededicate the temple and cleanse the temple. And we kind of thought that for a long time until we ran into
Well,
another number in the Ascension of
I
Isaiah.
had to figure out this other number.
And so I'm going to read the text, and then we're going to tell you what we figured out on the number here just last week.
okay.
This week we figured it out.
Yeah, this current week we're in.
Okay, so
Okay.
we're in the Testament of Hezekiah, which is in the apocryphal book, the Ascension of Isaiah. Now, just so everybody knows, Hugh Nibley said that he feels of all the apocryphal books, this one is the closest one to scripture. And Avraham Gileadi said the same thing. And they both said it's because this book is too Jewish to have been messed with by the Christians and too Christian to have been messed with by the Jews. Okay. So
Interesting.
this book called The Ascension of Isaiah, this is where we learn
I
how
want to read it.
this is how we learned how Isaiah was killed, that he was sawed in half. And we learn about Manasseh coming after him and that whole story. But in what's called the Testament of Hezekiah, chapter 4, it actually talks about how when Isaiah received his vision and the other prophets that were there that witnessed him receiving the vision. But now we're in the Testament of King Hezekiah. King Hezekiah was the king that Isaiah ministered to. And it was
Isaiah was his prophet.
Yes. And this is the Testament of Hezekiah, chapter 4 in the Ascension of Isaiah. It says, now, after it is consummated, now you remember when Daniel read 9:27, he said, and that which is determined shall be poured out on the desolate. This end time abomination of desolation, or another translation.
Well, it actually says one word, world, even until the consummation.
Even until the consummation. And so when it says after it is consummated, it's a direct reference to Daniel 9, verse 27. So it says, after it is consummated, that's drawing us right exactly to the abomination of desolation right there in Daniel. It says, Beliar, the great ruler, the king of this world, will descend. So this is our Antichrist figure. This is the really evil person. And it says, and all the people in the world will believe in him, and they will sacrifice to him. So now we've got your Antiochus Epiphanes type. We've got it all playing out here with this great ruler that comes at the time of the abomination of desolation. That's when Michael stands and Babylon falls, right there, when the abomination of desolation happens. And then it says, and there will be the power of his miracles in every city and region. That's Revelation 13, says the same thing. And he will set up his image before him in every city. That's Revelation 13 again.
It's also typed with Nebuchadnezzar.
And Nebuchadnezzar, when he set up the statue that everybody had to bow down to when the music played, and that's when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego get thrown in the fiery furnace.
Right,
they
right.
bow down. All right, which is a type too of this image when it gets set up and everything. But then it says in verse 12, and he, this king of the world that has ruled it since the beginning, this wicked person, it says he will bear sway 3 years, 7 months, and 27 days.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for a long time, we played with how you could figure that. And the problem that we had was that we were using a lunar months rather than the average days in a month, which is 30.4167 days. That's the average days in a month, according to Wikipedia, or according to Google. You can just Google for how many days are in a month. Okay, so it's 30.4167 on average.
Another way to get that is just take 365.24 days and divide by 12, and you get
You're
The
getting the
average
same
month.
thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what we're gonna do here is we're gonna take the average days per month and times it by, it says 3 years and 7 months. So 3 years is 36 months. Add 7 months to that, we have 43 months. So we multiply that by 43 and we get 1,308 days. But then it says plus 27 days. If you add 27 days to 1,308 days, you get exactly 1,335 days. It's the same number as
The same
Daniel.
number as Daniel.
We just tied this prophecy exactly back to Daniel.
Wow.
Okay.
And you think it's a Muslim or from an Islamic?
I think
He
he's,
keeps
I
saying
think he
stuff.
comes from there, but it does say he doesn't regard the religion of his fathers.
Mm.
So he probably has Islamic roots, but he doesn't.
What do you think, Rhonda?
Yeah,
Sorry.
I am a whole lot more hesitant to say anything about
She doesn't want to.
China or Muslim or all that because it's all speculation. And I don't want to discredit what the
I
scriptures are saying
right.
or because if
Or
something
get
doesn't
too
happen
saturated under
the
that.
way I thought it would, But the reason that
But Farrell is saying something more local.
yes, and
Here.
he's right in and of the fact that, I mean, I wouldn't disagree with him on this, but I come at it from a completely different reason. I come at it from Revelation chapter, I think it's chapter 20, where it says that they're asking, John's asking how long, and it says until the saints who are going to give their lives like the others have had a chance to do that. And he says, I saw the souls of all of those under the altar that had been beheaded. So
That's an Islamic
that
punishment.
that is what makes you think Quran or something is going on here.
Right.
Because
Right.
so many of the saints in Revelation are giving their lives by being beheaded. Okay.
Interesting.
And so
Okay.
that's one place where you make that connection. But again, if you start trying to identify, I mean, other than Egypt is America, which is pretty clear in scriptures in the end time typological scenario, and that the king of the north is from the Seleucid Empire, somewhere in that general location. Other than that, I think you're playing,
Well, you're guessing.
you're extrapolating,
Yeah,
right?
extrapolating, which sometimes I do. I just try to make it clear that that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm not saying scripture.
No. And I get that. And
Yeah,
and it's
and it's
interesting not to get too fixated on this, but I always pictured it being more of a Gentile outside of both of those religions, Jew and
The little horn is
Muslim.
going to fit that role.
Yeah,
exactly
and making some false promises to both of them almost. You know what I
right,
mean? Yeah.
right.
Well, that's
So
why the treaty is between them. It's
Yeah.
between the different perceptions of thought.
Right. Right.
But truthfully, neither one of them have good motives, according to Daniel 11.
No.
They
and of
both
course,
sit at the tables doing mischief, meaning they have intent to maneuver and manipulate.
and the way we see it is that in the end time, the king of the south is Egypt, which typologically is America in the end time. And so it's Egypt, the West and their alliances, and the king of the north is going to be the Antichrist figure and his allies. And so all we're saying is that in general, we can apply things to that, but you can come pretty clear that there's two. One is a little horn and one is the Antichrist. And the Antichrist is the one who descends, Revelation 12, verses 1-3, that he's cast down. There's a war in heaven and he's cast down. I know that most of us in Mormonism, we apply that to the pre-existence, which is fine on one level. But Joseph Smith said that everything in the book of Revelation was John recording the future.
Which all
Not
pictures
the
are kind of
past.
cyclical. So what has happened happens, and what has been will be, and that's that's the whole scenario. But the play out that's happening here is right there where he absolutely comes to
Yeah.
power. Big
All
way.
right. I know I can't get into that, Rhonda, but you just threw me for a loop. with that Joseph Smith said that everything in
He did.
Revelation was the
Teachings
future.
of the prophet Joseph Smith. Yes.
But even though Revelation talks about the third of the hosts and being cast out of
Yes,
heaven,
and understand that's cyclical. It's not a one-time event.
So,
interesting.
I'm
It's
not,
it's, it's
No, we're
just
not getting
Isaiah
into it.
46:10.
I'm just
I
going to
was
give you one reference.
Maybe
Okay, just
come
one.
back and talk about that another time.
Right, but I'll just give you one reference just to wet your whistle. In Hugh Nibley's book, Enoch the Prophet, it talks about when Satan loses his power, and it says that he says, "I will bow the knee to God the Father, but there's no way I'm bowing my knee to Adam." Okay, he says, because I was born first. That's what he
Ah,
says. He says, I'm first, not
a lot
Adam.
of
This is
jealousy
my
going on here.
world, not his. Okay. And so, anyway, in all of this, it says that, and that they, and Hugh Nibley is quoting a commentary on the Epistle of Elijah in this scenario. But it says that when Lucifer rebels, he's given ceremonial cuts that remove a third of his power. And so
Ah,
you have a reference to power being and so I'm
this is
saying
like a big royal family. You know, you've got the nepotism, you've got
well,
exactly.
in
the
essence,
righteous heir.
yeah, in essence, God's family is a royal family.
It is. And you got the
So,
jealous
we're not,
brother.
yeah, and you have the types with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob of this same play out. I mean, these all of God's plan is kind of one eternal round. So, in one sense, yes, it has happened. In another sense, it is always going to happen again, type thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
So,
we can drown in apocryphal writings, but the point is we only mention them when they're totally backing up scripture
Right,
or and so
right.
anyway,
context just clarifies.
That's
so
why I'm shutting up. I'm digressing out of this so you guys can
I've
keep
kind
going.
of I've kind of just made two cases for the fact that I think that it is this antichrist end time horrific person that is basically going to have the motto assimilate or be annihilated. Okay. Another translation for the abomination of desolation is the abomination that depopulates. It's assimilate or be annihilated. That's
Yeah.
going to be his policy. And from the prophetic types and shadows in Antiochus Epiphanes and from the ascension of Isaiah, where it says it pretty directly and ties it directly to Daniel's numbers, I think you can make a case that it's the second one, the king of the north, that sits on that sits on God's throne in Jerusalem and declares himself to be God, as it talks about in Second Thessalonians chapter 2 and Daniel 11, verse 45. Take it away. I made my point.
Oh no, you're doing good. I was debating, just how far we want to go today. I mean, because what you have is you see this complement, I call it complement, between Daniel's account and the Matthew 24 account, or Joseph Smith's Matthew, and the Revelation. When you want a clear picture, you have to combine all of the perspective that the whole gives you to see the picture, because to try to combine it with just one of them leaves you peeking through a little pinhole sometimes,
Right, right.
trying to get a view of it. Whereas if you can pull the whole thing together, you get the whole. And that's what I was thinking. I would maybe, I was going to wind up unless you.
Well,
Um,
I was just gonna say one more thing about him from Daniel 11 before you wind up, and that's that this king will do according to his will. He will exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods. And so he has a big mouth too, just like the little horn. And he will prosper till the indignation be accomplished. For that which is determined shall be done. That could be the little horn, but this is when we get to the other guy. Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, neither regard any God, and he himself shall magnify himself above all. And so here again, he's not like his fathers. Believes in a God of forces, it says, and a God whom his fathers knew not shall he honor with gold and silver and with precious stones. So
Yeah. So in essence, his motive is more plunder than hatred, than any of these others. His motive is plunder. So let me just
Right.
wrap up because I think we could, I mean,
You're just thinking about pancakes, aren't you?
yeah. uh, okay. And the reason I want to wrap up mostly is because, um, we could we could go on in different layers of different things all day, but if we did, I would want it to be structured, and I don't want to just ramble. So that's why I don't think we should just ramble. I think we should
Right.
kind of tie this together a little bit. So this next 10 years concept, kind of in concept, in structure, you have the eagle, Ezra's eagle, waking up virtually in the next 2 or 3 months. The heads I'm referring, we're already part of it. And according to the prophetic picture, the two that would reign are not able to reign. So something pretty drastic is going to happen before January 20th, from my perspective, which I believe is going to be political gymnastics from
uh,
both sides. I mean,
Mhm.
it's gonna be total upheaval. How that exactly goes, I don't know. It could go as far as even civil war. Hope that's not true. But in essence, um, all of this play out of wars and rumors of wars is going to play out during the reign of the three eagle heads, and then the little horn takes his positioning 3 years virtually from now, when he orchestrates the treaty between him and the Antichrist. And then we're going to see the little horn reign, because it says so in Revelation that he reigns 42 months. So that 42 months takes that on into Adam on Diamond. Adam on Diamond is this grand reversal event talked about in Daniel um, chapter 11 and 12, and also in Daniel 9, verse 27. That is kind of this big reversal point when Michael stands, according to Thessalonians and all these pictures. And then the last 1,335 days is when this Antichrist rules over the rest of the world. But we're in the process of building Zion during that time. And we have
Mhm.
the protection of the Shekinah glory or Shekinah glory, how depending on how I'd like to pronounce it. Okay, which means we have the protection like the children of Israel did, a fire by, or excuse me, a fire by night and a pillar of smoke by day. That's
Right,
the
right.
protection the New Jerusalem will have. And I see that kind of is in terms of layout, how the next 10 years basically roll out. And so that's kind of how I'd like to kind of tie it together. You got,
I'd like to end it by backing him up with this verse. The fact, like we talked about earlier, that Zion is established, the New Jerusalem is established in America before the wrath, before this antichrist figure comes in and does his horror till he is taken out at the Mount of Olives. It says in Revelation 12 that when the dragon comes in and he starts to go after the woman, that she takes the child, which Joseph Smith says is the kingdom of God, and she flees into the wilderness.
Before I forget, brothers and sisters, if you are enjoying the content, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ding the bell for notifications. Your support means the world to me and helps the channel grow. And hey, if you want to contribute to the program, I do prefer Venmo first, then Cash App, then PayPal, then Zelle. And I've got cool products. I got cool merch. That's all being designed. I get a percentage of it. And that's if you're interested. Remember, your comments are what keep this community thriving. So drop your thoughts below. And if you're feeling extra generous, consider becoming a YouTube member or sending a thanks, a super thanks right there. The button's right below the screen during our videos. Now back to the topic.
Again, this is a type of the Maccabees and everything. The Maccabees are going to win, but they have to gather in the wilderness and fight it out for 3 years first. But That place in the wilderness, that place in Revelation 12, it says in the text that it is a place prepared of God. Okay. And everybody speculates on what that is. But Moses 7 in the Pearl of Great Price absolutely tells us where that place prepared of God is, that during this time of wrath, people are being escaping to into the wilderness. And I'm just going to start in verse 62 of Moses 7. And it says, and righteousness will I send down out of heaven. So if you've got the bad guy coming down and descending, like it says in the Ascension of Isaiah, you also have righteousness descending as well. Righteousness will I send down out of heaven, and truth will I send forth out of the earth, to bear testimony of mine only begotten and his resurrection from the dead. Yea, also the resurrection of all men. I mean, it's coming very soon. And righteousness and truth will I cause to sweep the earth as with a flood. There's a flood of wickedness and there's a flood of righteousness, to gather out my elect from the four quarters of the earth. Now listen to this, unto a place which I shall prepare. Remember in Revelation 12 that she takes the child to the place that God prepared. So here it is. The Lord's
Oh,
going to tell
right.
us what that place is right here. Unto a place which I shall prepare, a holy city, that my people may gird up their loins and be looking forth for the time of my coming. For there will be my tabernacle, and it will be called Zion, a new Jerusalem.
The New Jerusalem.
So that is the place that God has prepared for this end time wrath period, for everyone who will, DNC 45, who will not take up a sword against his brother, will go there for peace and safety. And there, the kingdom of God will be established, so that when he returns at the
And
Mount of Olives, it will go forth. The
and
law will go forth.
I've always said that the millennium breaks forth like the stone cut forth without hands and builds steam and grinds away the kingdoms of the world. The millennium actually breaks forth at Adamon Daon, and it rolls forth, and then eventually all the kingdoms of the world are overtaken, just like it says in the dream of Nebuchadnezzar. The big statue is ground away. The kingdoms of the world are moved away, and the very dragon is locked up, basically, by what our new discoveries say. If this translation and record of Hezekiah is correct in the apocryphal vision or the ascension of Isaiah, it's basically 1,335 days later. So that's when this kind of wraps up.
I was just going to say in the juvenile instructor, we have an article, a very little known article. It was published in the Meridian magazine, but it is a memoir of someone that said that Joseph Smith taught him that when that kingdom rolls forth, that stone cut out of the mountain without hands, that it rolls forth slowly until it crushes the kingdoms and the statues. You know, we see it often pictured like some meteorite taking out the statue, you know.
Yeah,
But it's
I've
more of
heard.
a
Yeah,
just rolling over like a bowling ball more
yeah.
in slow motion.
I'll ask you guys off camera so we can cut it off,
Okay.
so we don't
Anyway,
get in little rabbit holes.
it's all
Maybe
good.
we should just have rabbit hole day once a month. Come on and we'll call it rabbit holing with the Pickerings, where we
Ace
just
and
go, hey,
bunnies.
I'll just have a list of things, questions, and we can get into it. All right. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Don't go away though.
Thanks for
But
sharing
but
with
you
us,
guys
Steve.
are going away. Huh?
Thanks
What?
thanks for letting us share.
Oh,
This is our
absolutely.
love,
This is
you know.
fun. This is fun. Guys, I want to say this before they go away. This isn't you know, our people go, well, these aren't important things. Well, they are. They wouldn't be in scripture, but we can talk about things that aren't always related to other things that we talk about in the gospel. In other words, you got the fun. I call it the fun stuff because it's still we're anticipating the Savior's return. We don't know what it looks like. I always say we're hitting the dartboard. We might not be hitting the bullseye all the time, but we are hitting the dartboard, right?
Well,
We-
I would argue that
Yeah.
that prophecy is the hope of salvation, meaning when we see all the trouble in the world, it's really hard to make sense of it unless you take it in the context of the whole plan. Um, Rhonda did a video called "The Backstory of Israel," where you actually get the relationship of what's going behind the scenes to make it all happen. And I think that is a beautiful parallel. Um, she actually tied it into Disney's backstory between some of the
When
Oh,
they do the
yeah.
cameos
before
of all
Disney
the
became so
characters.
woke.
I
Uh,
saw your video actually. I know what he's talking about on your website. And I
yeah,
always list your website right here. So as we've been doing this the whole time, we
Yeah,
have
and you can go to our website and then we have a ton of videos up on Latter Day Media
yeah,
as
our
well.
Come Follow Me's are on Latter
YouTube
Day
channel.
Oh,
Media.
okay.
All
All
of our
right, thank
Come Follow Me stuff, and a lot of that stuff is on Latter Day Media.
awesome. And we did get through everything, right? With the that you guys wanted to on this.
Oh, you know,
We just wanted to talk about
there's
the little horn and the
one
Antichrist.
thing about water running down the river, it never stops. But
But did we thoroughly get through what you wanted to say on the
I
little horn and
I think this is
Antichrist?
as good a stopping place as we could make it.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, I better go.